back to another edition of the Throwing at Chairs podcast. Had a tough loss to rival Purdue Tuesday night. We're going to talk a lot about that game against rival Purdue, and then we're going to kind of preview what's coming up for Indiana. But without further ado, as always, I'm your host, Hayden Smith, joined alongside the Hoosier Network's finest, Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano. And joining us here today from WIUX, it is Cruz. Martin. Cruz, thank you so much for being on the pod. We've talked about having you on, and it's glad to finally get you here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right, well, before we get started, let's get Cruz up to speed with what we really do here on TCP. We're going to get started with our icebreaker, and this one, I kind of like, I've had this discussion with Cruz a couple times.
Oh, so
what
he,
is your
he knows what to say.
And not necessarily.
I don't even know what he's talking about right now, so we have a lot of conversations.
Is your favorite sit-down restaurant appetizer?
Oh,
when did we talk about this?
We've talked about it before. I don't know if it's you specifically, but I've talked about it with multiple people. It's whenever you go to a restaurant, sit down, and they just put it right in front of you.
Okay, I think the basic.
I'm really curious about all this.
There's some wrong answers. To go. Like, are you saying they place it in front of you, or you order it?
No, you cannot. You don't order it.
Oh.
Like bread or chips or something like that.
Basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, there's not a whole lot of options that come to mind.
Yeah.
Should we? Yeah, I'd probably just say bread or like a good little Caesar salad.
Okay. Let's kind of dig deeper a little here. Certain restaurants have like their certain. It's not necessarily a twist, but it's like you go to that restaurant and you're all like, oh, I can't wait until I get this.
I know exactly what you're saying. I don't have a good example in mind. But
for me, it would be Texas Roadhouse rolls. That is by far my favorite. Either that or tumbleweed chips and salsa.
I'm about to say about Mexican restaurant chips and salsa is the only thing that came to mind, so that was what I was going to roll with.
You going to roll with El Squero, Cruz?
No, I'm going to go with Puerto Vallarta. Chips and salsa.
I've heard great things about Olive Garden's breadsticks, but I've never had them, so I'm not going to.
You've never had them?
I've only heard how great they are.
Oh, you're missing out, Thomas.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it, but my answer would probably be, I'd say this is like rare because they usually don't provide the queso, but when they do, I'll go with chips and queso.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. This is actually probably the hardest icebreaker you've given yet.
That's what I'm talking about. I've strived for this every episode to try and stump you all.
You know, there's always those like random restaurants that'll just bring out this different type of bread.
Yep.
I think, like, I don't want to go with the Texas Roadhouse rolls, which obviously they're good, but, like, I'm thinking of a restaurant right now that had, like, the most incredible bread. I'm not going to be able to name it, but I think I'm just going to go with the basic bread at restaurants.
Understandable. There's a lot of restaurants that have good bread. There's a lot that I'm thinking of. Most of them I don't think you all would really know because they're not really chains. But we'll get away from this conversation. We're going to go a little bit too deeper than we have to go, and let's get on to a more serious note in the Indiana-Purdue game that took place Tuesday night at Assembly Hall. The Hoosiers lost a big one to the Boilermakers, 87-66. Guys, I want to get your all's initial takeaways from this game. It was the largest loss at Bloomington against the Boilermakers since 1934. The final score of that game was 47-13.
Wow.
And the Boilermakers came out on top. Guys, initial reactions, initial thoughts. Audrey, I'll start with you.
It was ugly. No question that it was very ugly. I think that overall, looking at a takeaway right now, is that Indiana was completely unprepared when facing Zach Edey. I mean, Kel'el Ware and Malik Renew could have had a much better game plan when they were facing Zach Edey in the paint, and it just was not successful. It was as if they didn't even have a game plan in that area. But on a good note, I will say my player to watch for my pick last week was Trey Galloway, and he completely led Indiana down the charge.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's been great.
Yeah, so I think looking forward, if he can continue to pick up his pace, Indiana can really use his leadership down the stretch.
Thomas, what you got?
Well, Audrey said it best. It was ugly. They were down 20 at half and never crawled back. They had a little bit there in the second half.
Brought it to within 9.
Yeah, they brought it to within 9 with that Gabe Cuffs 3-pointer. But after that, really it was Purdue the entire way. as Audrey said, they were completely unprepared for Zach Edey. I couldn't agree with that more. Zach Edey dominated from start to finish. Specifically on Kel'el Ware. Ware had, I think, 0 rebounds at halftime, which just can't happen in any game, and especially not against Zach Edey.
I mean, especially at 7 foot. Granted, Zach Edey is 7'4", but there's got to be a couple that's going to be able to go his way. Cruz, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head. It was ugly, but it was also frustrating to watch, too. You know, just the way that the game transpired. Indiana couldn't match Purdue's physicality, which gave them a lot of problems. That's how Purdue got off to that 22-point halftime lead. You know, you saw a good segment from them coming out of halftime, which was good to see that team compete. That's all I was really asking for coming out of halftime. And, you know, after that, things just kind of stagnated and it got back to the way it was in the first half. Again, just an ugly, gruesome rock fight that Indiana had no chance in, to be completely honest with y'all.
Yeah, Cruz, you make a really good point. I mean, that first 4-minute segment in the first half, whenever Indiana started off the gates hot, it was really all Mackenzie Mbako. He had the first 7 points for the Hoosiers, and then that first 4-minute segment of the second half. I mean, that's really the only bright spots I can really take from the game against Purdue. And I mean, the fouling is really what killed Indiana's momentum. Now, were some of the fouls maybe warranted or not? Well, that's not up for debate. But it's Indiana has been fouling teams, and teams are getting to the free throw line, and Purdue really just took advantage of that. They shot 22 of 27 from the line. Edey himself shot 11 of 12. I mean, that's just pure dominance from the Boilermakers, guys. We did this segment earlier in the season. I want to bring it back because I thought it was really good. I want to try and condense it a little bit quicker. So we're going to give our good, bad, and ugly against the Boilermakers on Tuesday. I'll go on ahead and start off, and I'll just quickly go through all three. My good was, like I said, Indiana's start, and Mbako played really good. He was aggressive against the Purdue defense, and he drove inside on Zach Edey a couple times and got him up in the air and drew contact. And then also Trey Galloway, I thought his attack and his leadership out there, he was really the only guy out there that I thought really this game meant something to him, and he was really the only one that I saw was a bright spot.
Yeah, I have to go with you on the Trey Galloway part. And also, the start of the game was definitely a bright spot. And I want to also say the second half, the start of the second half. That first, I want to say, was it 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes that they cut it down to 9? Yeah. It's like in that time of the game, Trey Galloway and Mackenzie Mbako were in sync because they were both really just leading them down the stretch. And if they were to just play that way the entire game, that's a completely different game plan that Indiana would have been successful in. And they tried to stick with the same game plan and trying to get Kel'el Ware and Zach Edey to match up, and it just wasn't working from the start. And Zach Edey just completely dominated.
Yeah, I thought Mackenzie Mbako was good for sure, especially in those first 8 minutes. He scored 7 points, and he picked up that second foul, and Woodson unfortunately pulled him, which he later in the press conference said he regretted. And beyond, Mbako finished with 15 points, so he had a solid second half as well. Galloway, of course, like you guys just mentioned, 17 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. He played his butt off in 36 minutes. He played the most on the team. Malik Renew was right behind him with 35. But Galloway was far and away the leader for Indiana yesterday. And as you guys mentioned, one of the few bright spots. For the bad, I have foul trouble. I mean, that changed the game kind of right off the bat. As I just mentioned, where Mbako, that when they came off the floor, the bench unit really had no answers for Zach Edey, and the game got out of hand from there. And they never returned in the first half, which, you know, like I just said, Woodson said he regretted. But with that, the free throws that you mentioned, Purdue shot 27, and we talked about this before the game, but Indiana's been doing a good job themselves getting to the line, but they have also done a very poor job of staying out of foul trouble. The last couple games, Purdue just shot 27, Minnesota shot 24, Kansas shot 24, Michigan 24, UConn 25, Nebraska 26, Rutgers 28, Louisville 29. Those
crazy.
Yeah, those are way, way too high. They've got to limit their foul trouble. And as you said, maybe some weren't warranted, but if you look at their previous games, it wasn't a problem in just Purdue. And then the ugly I have, Ware in that first half, as we mentioned, he had 1 rebound, no points against Zach Edey, the best player in the country. And, you know, you definitely expect a little bit more from him. And then Xavier Johnson, who I'm sure we're going to touch on in a little bit. Yes. He was scoreless once again, 0 for 5 in 20 minutes. He picked up another flagrant foul, and his body language, I don't know. I'm sure we're going to touch on him in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for the good for me, as bad as it is, you showed competitiveness against a really good Purdue team. You know that
At spurts.
And I'm not saying obviously for the whole game, but that first segment or two coming out of halftime, Indiana looked like a well-rounded team. They were able to chip into that lead, cut it from 22 at halftime down to 9 before Purdue was able to keep them off and then run the rest of the way, run the table. You know, you show competitiveness, but obviously that's enough, and that's where the bad comes into play. You still got blown out on your home court. You know, Assembly Hall is supposed to be one of the best places to play at in the nation. It's supposed to be one of the best home courts, and you were just run off it by your arch rival. Given they're the number 2 team. Yes, Indiana's going through a lot of transitional stuff right now, considering how much they lost last year and who the personnel they have this year is. But at the same time, you know, 22 or whatever the final tally was yesterday, is just unacceptable, you know, especially against a conference rival. You have to compete, you know. You got to show that it means something. You know, you talked about Trey Galloway. You could tell that game meant something to him, but I can't say the same across the board for all those guys. And then the ugly, honestly, it was just the way that it transpired and how Purdue got off to that lead. I mean, you take a look at what Indiana did. They were attacking the basket early on in the game, right? They were going inside. They weren't getting a lot of foul calls. So then they start settling beyond the arc, and that's when the game really went downhill, at least in the early going. They start settling, which obviously, as everybody knows, Indiana is not a good three-point shooting team. That's the last thing that they needed to do was stop attacking the basket, putting pressure on the bigs for Purdue, and just on the defense in general, and start settling. And that's when they got into that hole. They started attacking in the second half. Shots started falling. They started to chip their way back in. They start settling again, and the rest is history.
Yeah, they were taking the shots that Purdue wanted them to take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
8 of
100%.
24 from deep was Indiana against Purdue. Quite few of those, actually 7 of those, all came in the second half because Indiana only hit 1. They were 1 of 12 at the break. And then after that, they really started to get hot and started to hit a couple threes, really led by Trey Galloway. I do want to bring this up that I just came across. A shout out to Assembly Call, who ended up getting this piece of information. Indiana's starting 5 with Gabe Cupps is one of the 10 most efficient lineups in the country. They have been flat out incredible. And in the 7 Big Ten games that starting 5 has played, together for 64 minutes, they have a net rating of plus 36.
Wow.
Absolutely outstanding. And that lineup itself outscored Purdue 32-27. It shows you that there is a lineup out there that works for Indiana. It's just really, whenever the bench comes in, everything just gets thrown off its rhythm. CJ Gunn has really been hit or miss in the past couple games. He played 17 minutes. He had 7 points, a lot of that coming in garbage time. But yeah, I mean, my ugly, it's really just quite easy for me. The game was just absolutely ugly to watch, nearly from start to finish. Indiana just really never looked comfortable against the second-ranked Boilermakers. Guys, another news segment that we have here for this game against Purdue. I want to go over a little bit of a report card against the Boilermakers. So I've got offense, defense, effort, and your player choice. Let's start off with the offense. Whoever wants to go first can go. Audrey, you're giving a little bit of a smirk over there. So.
I'm not giving a smirk. I'm thinking.
Okay. Thomas, let's go to you.
All right. I mean, offensively, I almost have to say, obviously, it has to be Galloway. He was fantastic.
Let's go a broader.
Just gave me a side eye.
Broader perspective instead of a certain player. Let's go for like the entire offense. What are they from an A, B, C, D, or F scale?
Okay.
I apologize. I should have.
Gotcha.
I should have elaborated.
Honestly,
here.
that makes a lot more sense considering it's a report card, so that's on me. Offense. I want to think about it for a half a second as well, but I mean, I'll tell you one thing: it's not an A.
You're not wrong.
I don't know, maybe
groundbreaking stuff right there.
Like C-ish.
Okay. Average.
Yeah, like average, maybe even a little bit below average. They shot 27 for 65. That's 41.5%. I think they definitely picked it up in the second half, especially when they went on that run. But from an overall perspective, the offense, I think it's no better than a C. In my opinion.
Cruz, let's go over to you.
I was going to say below average. I was going to go with a D. I mean, let's talk about it for a minute because, you know, we saw their offense at spurts last night, like you said, but at the same time, in the grand scheme of things, it was just an ugly day offensively for Indiana. They weren't doing anything that I think Mike Woodson and the coaching staff wanted them to do post the 8-minute mark or so, maybe the 10-minute mark of the first half. and then probably after the 12-minute mark in the second half, start settling for jump shots, which again is not Indiana's strong suit. Just an ugly day offensively.
Yeah, Cruz, I'm right there with you. I'm also going to give Indiana a D on offense. A big stat that pops out to me. I'm sorry I keep on just throwing out these stats just straight out in the air. Nobody's just going to just go straight over their heads.
I mean, that last stat was pretty notable.
Don't make me laugh.
Incredible.
Indiana against Purdue scored .929 points per possession, which if that stat just flew over your head, that's not good. No. With Mackenzie Mbako and Kel'el on the floor together for the game, they scored 1.63 points per possession, which is above what Purdue was for the entire night. So, yeah, their offense, for the grand scheme of things, like Cruz said, was just an eyesore to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go kind of along with you guys. I'm going to go, a C- for the offense because every you guys hit it, every point, is that they were successful in spurts. And you can't keep everybody on the floor at the same time. I understand the logic in bringing in the bench, but you have to keep some of those you can't take Mackenzie Mbako and Kel'el out at the same time. I know that there was foul trouble, and especially apparent in last night's game, but your two biggest playmakers that were having the most success on the court, and you take them out at the same time, then you see Indiana start to go downhill. There's no way that you are going to be successful in the long run when you continue changing out your rotations like that. And again, it's understandable, and I see there has been a bit of a change going down the stretch now in these games, which has been seen. But in a big game like this, you can't let that get away from you.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I had a conversation with somebody earlier that, in this type of a game against the second-ranked Boilermakers, you have nothing to lose in this ball game. So with Mackenzie, I understand to a certain extent benching Kel'el with the two fouls early on in the game because, again, he's really the only person out there that can alter Zach Edey's shot. So you've got to keep him out of foul trouble. But for him to sit on the bench as long as he did is what was really troubling to me. And then the same with Mackenzie Mbako. I think you keep Mbako on the floor whenever he picked up his second foul. I think you trust him. Granted, he's a freshman. He's going to make those freshman mistakes. But he scored all 7 of your points by the under 16. Clearly something is working, and clearly he is feeling it, and he is in a rhythm, and you take him out of the game, and then that rhythm is completely gone. Let's transition over to the next topic of discussion in the report card. Let's talk about the defense. Guys, what do you have for this?
I'm gonna go more a C+ because Braden Smith was held to 5 points, shooting 2 for 14. I think Trey Galloway did a great job on defense in that aspect, but everything else was very, very poor. So I think it could have been, it was a horrible outcome as it was, but it could have been a lot worse if the guard play was messier than it was, and it was better in this game than it has been in games prior. But then you look at Zach Edey, who finished with 33 points and 14 rebounds, and you have to look at that, and you have a 7-footer on the team as well, and then who only had 26 minutes to play compared to Zach Edey's 36. It just goes back to the point of looking at the result, honestly. So
Thomas,
I'm going to give them another C, and if I could go back in time, I might lower the offensive rating because I think the defensive rating should be a little bit higher. But I'm going to go with the C again. I agree. It could have been worse, and therefore their rating would have been even lower. But it was not pretty at all. Purdue scored 87 points. I think it's at least the second time a team has scored 87 this season, if not the third time. I can't remember exactly, but 3 Purdue players scored 15 plus. Fletcher Loyer had 19. Zach Edey, like we just said, had 33, and another player had 17. Purdue had 50 plus in the first half, and they shot 50% from the field in the first half. That was lowered to 44% in the second half. But that's still pretty good shooting. That you'll take that if you're Purdue. And we've seen much better defense from Indiana throughout the season than we saw Tuesday night.
Cruz.
Yeah, I'll give them a C-. You talk about giving up 50 in the first half, obviously unacceptable. You do hold them to 37 in the second half, but again, you give up 50 in the first half kind of overshadows that. And there were times last night, especially early on in the second half, where Indiana had some momentum going. You could feel the building starting to get the energy back in. You creep down within 15, 12, 9 points. and your defense can't get a rebound. There were multiple times last night where Indiana couldn't complete a defensive rebound or defensive possession with a rebound, and Purdue was able to get buckets out of that off of second chance points. And so that's just extremely deflating. You got to be able to put together an entire possession defensively. Obviously, it's not just playing 36 of defense. You got to secure the rebound, and then that's just one thing that stuck out to me.
Yeah, well, that's been a problem really for Indiana all season long. Just the inability to keep the opposing team off the offensive glass. But obviously, Purdue, they've got tall players out there. Obviously, in a 7'4" Zach Edey, he's going to get his own, but you at least have to show that effort out there to keep them off the offensive glass. I'm going to go even lower than you guys, and I'm going to say a D-. Yes, it would honestly be an F without that start to the second half for Indiana. And like Cruz said, how they really started to get the energy back into the building. But with that, I'm going to keep Indiana at a D-. Again, the fouling, 19 fouls. Players were out there, and Purdue really started to get a handle of that. Indiana was jumping at everything that Purdue put up. I mean, there'd be multiple times. One I'm thinking about is whenever Xavier Johnson flew from one end of the court all the way to the other and then just jumped out into the sky trying to block a shot, and all it was a simple pump fake.
Who had the ball then? Do you remember?
Pretty sure it was Fletcher Lawyer.
Yeah, I'm flying at him, man. I'm flying at him. You send Xavier Johnson flying at him. That's all you can really ask for. You got to make Fletcher Lawyer put it on the deck. But Hayden, one thing that stood out to me and you guys as well, the physicality of the game, I think, is what really did Indiana in. You look at the foul disparity. I don't know what the exact numbers is, Thomas, but you could probably tell us.
Indiana had 19 personal fouls, and Purdue had 12.
7 fouls for the game is still a pretty big disparity, and the free throw disparity is big too.
And it started off like 6-1 or 7-1.
Yeah, it was. I want to say it was 7-1. 7-1. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's where Indiana lost a lot of ground last night. No wonder you got a guy like Zach Edey down in the post, but at the same time, it's frustrating because there are ways to get around that, and I don't think that Indiana was ready for the physical challenge that Purdue brought to the table last night.
All right, let's go to our second to last one, and that is going to be the effort. We've talked about this a couple times already. I want to get your all's thoughts as a whole on Indiana's effort.
I'm gonna go with another C+ because it goes back to my point on Trey Galloway last week, is that I thought that he would be the only person on the court that really knew the true severity of what was actually happening on the court, and I stand by that. I think with the environment, even the environment was almost different than usual Purdue games. There wasn't anybody. There wasn't.
Felt like it was more stagnant.
It was
than you
a lot more stagnant, and it wasn't even like.
They had a couple boos at halftime.
They had boos as they were heading into halftime, and it wasn't even full with 20 minutes into starting to tick.
Yeah.
So, it was just a much different environment, and Purdue was obviously a lot more prepared. I saw a video that they were actually practicing with
pumping in the crowd music.
with massive just people cheering.
Painter said that they've
creativity.
He said he's done that for his entire tenure.
Really?
At Purdue. He said he's done that for 20 plus years to prepare for the atmosphere of Assembly Hall.
Yeah, well, they were prepared for it, but then they got a completely different environment at Assembly Hall to their advantage. So I think just Trey Galloway gets an A for effort, but everybody else is more around that C- range because, it's just, especially if you're hitting players on and off the bench continuously, you're not going to have that spark when you're just watching from the bench and you're not actually.
To your point on Purdue being prepared, there was a moment in the game, I don't remember who for Purdue were shooting free throws, but it was early in the game, early in the first half, and Purdue was up 5-10, whatever it was, and Indiana was loud. It was still very much a game. And whoever was shooting was just completely owning it. He started he wanted to hear more from the crowd, and he knocked down both free throws and shut the crowd up. And to my point, they were definitely prepared yesterday and confident the entire way, and it showed.
I know it's Purdue, number 2 team in the country, but do you think it's a little bit concerning that opposing teams aren't concerned going into Assembly Hall with the reputation that it has as one of the hardest places to play in the country? Is that concerning at all?
It's that. See, I'll tell you what. Watching him hype up the crowd and then knock down both free throws was definitely a statement without making an actual statement.
Cruz, Indiana's effort.
Well, other than if you take out the first couple segments of the second half, F. I mean, just straight up.
Yeah.
I mean, first half especially, down the stretch, whenever the energy got taken out of the building, it's almost like it was just a carbon copy of the first half. But, those first two segments of the second half, I'll bump that up to D+.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say right around there to C. Again, like Cruz just said, at Spurts, Indiana really showed a lot of effort, especially right there at the start of the second half. But beyond that, for the entire game, in the grand scheme of things, Indiana just really, their body language was a real tell about how, I don't want to say prepared they were for this game, but how everything just started to culminate against them, and they started realizing what was about to happen. Guys, let's move into our second segment here. Guys, it's been a struggle as of recent for Indiana. It's been kind of back and forth. In the past 4 games, they've gone loss, win, loss. Here to start off Big Ten play. When is it time to hit the panic button? Because I will say this, Indiana has yet to get a quad 1 victory, and that's exactly what the selection committee will look at whenever it comes time for Selection Sunday.
I think it may be time to hit the panic button after we see the result of these next 2 games and when Indiana plays Iowa back in Assembly Hall. Because as you said, I think a couple weeks ago, that Iowa always really brings it for Indiana. Sure. So I think right around the Iowa mark, depending on the result of these next 2 games, and if they both result in losses, if one results in a loss, I think if they all result in losses, I'd say it's time to hit the panic button.
I disagree. I think the time to hit the panic button is now. We briefly mentioned it last podcast on when is the time to hit the panic button, and we agreed we don't think we're there. Skip ahead a week, and we just lost by more than 20 on our home court to our arch rival, to the Hoosiers' arch rival. I don't think you can hit the panic button after those potential losses. It's kind of too late in my book. At that point, you got to realize what you're looking at now before it is too late. And so for me, I think the time to hit the panic button is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with you, but I think with this next stretch in Indiana's schedule, they're mostly away games. Yeah. So that's really the biggest tell, and Indiana has been very, very poor on the road so far. So if they're able in this next stretch to go on the road and perform a lot stronger than they have in this beginning of the season, I think that will be a big tell, because that is usually what gets you into the tournament, is good play on the road. So these next few games and these next 2 games are on the road. So, again, going back to my point, these next 2 games, I think, will be the tell.
I'm going to put a damper on the party, and, forgive me for saying this. My panic button has been pressed since the offseason, to be completely honest with you, because, especially coming from a season last year where you lose so much talent, all the roster turnover, that this year is not going to live up to the par that was last season. I think everybody knows that coming in. It's still unfortunate when you have to go through that process and watch your team lose games that you wish they could be competitive in, but at the same time, you got to understand at what point this IU team is and trying to get back to that point. They're still in the early stages. You got Mackenzie Mbaka, who's a young guy. Kel'el Ware, who's just now starting to come on as a legit college basketball player. Gabe Cupps, not even a full season yet. So, I mean, Indiana has good building blocks, but I think it's still way too early. You also have guys who are going to be leaving this year, Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, who are making their way out. So, my panic button's been hit, but at the same time, and the way I'm trying to explain this is, I expected Indiana to be in a position similar to this up to this point. So my panic button's kind of been going off. It's unfortunate to see it play out, though.
Yeah, I told you all, you thought I was the realist. You haven't seen anything just yet.
just wait
until we give our predictions here in just a short amount of time. You'll really see how everything's about to go. I'll say Indiana, they have to win. I believe they have to win at least one of these next 2 games if they want any chance of making the NCAA tournament. Because like I just said, they have yet to win a quad 1 game this season. But these 2 games, you have an opportunity to get a quad 1 win on the road. That'd be a statement victory. But again, you still have to be able to perform the rest of the season. But I completely agree with you, Cruz. I think expectations, I don't want to say they were too high coming into this season, but I think Indiana fans as a whole just always expect a lot from the Hoosier team,
100%.
which is understandable because they're are a blue blood program historically, not really as of recent, of course, but this is still a very respectable program, and they expect a lot from the Cream and Crimson. Guys, let's move on here really quickly to really the team as a whole. I really want to pick your all's brains on the bright spots and really the eyesores of what has been from the team as of recent. What has really been a bright spot since the start of 2024 for you guys?
I think Trey Galloway has been a bright spot. I mean, not only just with Purdue, but he's got a lot on his shoulders, not only as the senior captain, but he's dealing with a team that he has seen the very highs of, and now he's seeing the very lows of, and that's got to take a toll.
He's seen lower than this.
Yeah, he has seen lower than this, of course. But that's gotta take a bigger toll than it does for like someone like Gabe Kops, who this is his first season, his first experience. So with all that being said, I think Trey's effort has definitely been there, to say the least. I don't know, at least compared to the other captain, Xavier Johnson, who I'm sure we'll get to in a couple minutes.
I honestly talk about these three every podcast, and it has to be the big men, Mackenzie Mbako, Malik Renew, and Kel'el Ware. I mean, that is something that Indiana needed, a desperate replacement whose shoes still haven't necessarily been filled of Trace Jackson Davis. They'll never be filled. But they have been filled with these three, and I think that they all each have a lot of versatility that they bring to the court that Trace Jackson Davis almost didn't bring sometimes. He never really knocked down a three, but Kel'el Ware, Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako, obviously, they all are able to shoot beyond the arc sometimes. And I think that when they have the right game plan for them, Indiana is seen to be a potential NCAA tournament team, but that's the point of the season, is that it's not always there.
So far this year, I mean, at least this calendar year, Indiana's shown flashes of the team that they could be. I mean, look at the Ohio State game, single-digit turnovers. Indiana's offense is really turning that game. Again, both of these games are at home. At Minnesota, they got off to that blazing hot start against the Gophers, like 25-8 or something like that, something incredible. This team has shown flashes of who they can be, and I think that's what's so frustrating, is the fact that you've seen just how good they can be. They just haven't been able to unlock that on a consistent basis, and I think that's one thing that's frustrating. But it's also a good sign for this team, knowing that they still have something left in them.
As of recent, I think Mackenzie Mbako is really starting to get a lot more comfortable. I mean, again, it's like what Mike Woodson said, and I've said this on the podcast before. You don't expect a freshman like Mbako coming out of high school to immediately be a Jalen Hood-Schifino against Purdue and West Lafayette. You don't expect that from him right out of the gates. You knew it was going to take a little bit of time. But again, like I said earlier, this is Indiana basketball, and the fans are going to expect a lot out of you. But especially as of recent, I thought he's really started to shine. He's putting the ball on the deck, and he's been able to drive it inside, draw contact. His free throws are certainly starting to take a little bit of a step back from where they were, but that he's getting to the line a lot more often, and he's knocking down his shots. He's getting better defense. Like I said, he's just getting a lot more comfortable out there. Now, let's put a damper on things here for a second and talk about the eyesores. I have a feeling we're all going to be in unison about who the eyesore really has been as of recent, so I'll just go on ahead and get started. It's been Xavier Johnson. And I hate, again, how rough it has been for X as of recent. Minus that Ohio State game, he's averaging a point a game, 3 turnovers, 2 fouls, half a flagrant in 4 games, and he's shooting 1 of 14 from the field. That's just, it's really unacceptable from a 6th-year captain for the Indiana Hoosiers who has been here, has seen some great moments for Indiana, and I just, something needs to change, and he just has to get back into a better mental state.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this at some point in a podcast before, but I think that Indiana adjusted to the absence of Xavier Johnson once he got that cracked foot. And once they did, they had a completely different team and they had a completely different motivation. And I think now Xavier Johnson is trying to fit himself into it. And I think he's almost overdoing it. And that's what's causing these flagrants. That's what's causing these shots that just aren't as accurate as they usually are for him. And I think that he needs to almost just slow down a little bit. And I think he knows this is his last time that he will be on the court. But he's just doing it in all of the wrong ways. And he's obviously he's just not on the same wavelength as the rest of the team right now. And it's hard to see, but it's not working anymore for Indiana.
I think that was really well said, and I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'm not going to add too much to that other than beyond the stats, which have been, horrific. The body language is just a whole nother topic of conversation. He's the captain of this team, and he has picked up 2 flagrant fouls in the past 4 games. One of them resulted in an ejection. There's been multiple times that we've talked about during the games where he'll come off the court, he'll throw his shooting sleeve on the ground because he's not playing well, sit at the end of the bench, come to the front of the bench to speak with some coaches, puts his head in his hands, and this is from the captain of the team. And, people watch this. We watch this watching the game.
Kids watch it.
Kids watch it, and there's a lot going on. I do think it's mental. We know he can play the game of basketball, and he has to figure it out.
And kind of going off of that, I think it's almost to be said that I noticed at some point when it was someone on Purdue got fouled or something, they all got into a huddle, and Xavier Johnson was almost on the other end of the court, and it was Gabe Cupps leading him into the huddle and telling him to come into the huddle. And he was just walking very, very slow into the huddle.
Yeah.
So I think it's to be said who has gotten the starting job and where it has led Indiana to this point.
Yeah, Thomas, you walked in the same door that I was going to walk in with the body language of Xavier Johnson. It's concerning. Like you said, he's the captain of this team. He's the person that people on the team need to look up to. Guys like Gabe Cupps, where it's almost been reciprocated. Now Gabe Cupps is the leader that Xavier Johnson has needed, especially in that moment that Audrey was talking about. It's unfortunate to see your captain go through something like that. And, if you're the guys on Indiana, just pick him up, man. Pick him up. Make him feel loved and, make him understand that, you're going to go through frustrating times, not only in basketball, but in life as well. And you need to figure out how to deal with that. And I think, at least as of right now, Xavier Johnson is dealing with it the wrong way.
Yeah.
This is exactly why I brought him on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. He's just going to go right in there, and he's going to give it to you straight.
While you were saying that, Hayden was just like smirking and laughing.
I'm a proud father over here. All right, let's move forward. I can never replace Jamie Martin. Let's move forward here, and let's talk about what is coming up for the Indiana Hoosiers. They travel out to Madison, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is going to be Audrey's stomping grounds. Both of you guys are traveling. I will wish you all farewell, safe travels, and I will be watching here from Bloomington, Indiana.
Audrey, do you know how much colder it is there than here?
Oh, no.
I know. I know right now they have 16 inches of snow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I did not know that.
Good luck.
Have fun with that.
They have 16 inches of snow.
We'll be down here in semi-warm Bloomington.
Semi-warm. I left the semi-warm yesterday. It was 6 degrees. I checked the weather app.
Yeah.
The wind chill made it feel like -6.
Oh, get ready for this.
Crazy.
Get ready for this. I was texting my parents yesterday morning when I was going to I ran to Target or whatever. So I went to go and I texted them. It was 6 degrees in my car. And they were just like, oh, it feels like -26 here.
Oh my God. I can't even comprehend what that feels like. That's insane.
So
Think about that Chiefs game. People were out inside in that weather. There was
Oh my
a
God.
People that were
game.
hospitalized.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I know.
dedication, though. I'll give it to him. That's dedication.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
-26.
Yeah.
Well,
Hayden,
unbelievable.
is it too late to
Welcome
switch?
to the Badger,
old
welcome to the
Midwest
Badger
weather.
State, Thomas.
Yeah, that's, oh my
Never
goodness.
gets old.
good luck
Yeah.
out in Madison, Wisconsin. But this is also a place where Indiana themselves have been frigid at the Kohl Center. Haven't won there since. Does anybody know the exact date? I know you know.
1998.
Yes.
January 25th? No, is that right? Is it January 25th?
I
Or
don't
is that the
know,
last
but
time
if
it
you
was when the
actually-
losing streak started?
If you actually
I Googled
know
this
the
right before I
date-
came in here.
Of
so
course you
Is
did.
it? Well, of course. Of
January
course.
25th is involved somehow, so
Well-
we'll have to fact check that here in a minute.
I know it's 1998. so-
1998 was the last time they won there. 2000, I think, was when the losing streak started.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, you are actually, you are correct. So the last time Indiana won there was 1998. It's only one time in Kohl Center history that they have actually won there in Madison, Wisconsin. So the last time Indiana won, 1998. What was happening in the world during 1998? And I'm going to push you all to the test. None of us were born.
Yeah.
Thomas,
Obviously.
you're the old man here.
No.
You are not born in
I am the
98.
old man, but
Not
I'm
quite.
a 2000
Not
man.
quite.
Still a
He
2000
is the old man of the podcast.
If I was
That's gonna be
1998
like 15
still,
yards.
You
still
would-
here, we
you'd
would
be-
have a problem.
Flaker foul right there.
we would have a
1998.
problem. But what was
Not that
going on in the world in 1998? I'm going to put you all to the test.
Okay.
Who was the president of the United States in 1998?
Whoa.
Bill Clinton.
Yeah, Clinton. I'm going Clinton
Bill
as well.
Clinton.
Yeah.
The Monica Lewinsky trials happened in 1998.
When
Wow.
did politics become a part of TCP?
It just became
Welcome
a
to the
part.
Throwing Chairs podcast, episode 9.
It
We're
is
getting
episode
political.
9, actually. We are almost in double figures. Okay, let's
my
move on to
goodness.
another one. What was the hit song of 1998?
Hayden, what in the
Oh, hang on.
I'm
I might
putting
be the
you
guy to
all-
answer this.
I'm putting you all to the test. This is American
man.
history right now. Hit
I-
song in 1998 it's a huge song.
Specific genre? Do you have
give
a genre?
Give a genre.
I don't actually know what the genre of this song is. It's a love song, and it was
Is it like
in
an ABBA song? or
it
something?
was in a massive
That was way
movie
older
that
than
was
that.
also the it was in this movie was actually the top grossing movie of 1998 and one of the top grossing movies of all time.
Titanic?
Wow.
Oh,
What was the song?
couldn't tell you.
My heart will go on.
Yes, of
Celine
course.
Dion.
Okay.
Boom.
My heart will go on.
right.
You guys-
Celine
I
Dion.
thought I was pretty damn good
There
at
you
this,
go.
Was
but
the
you guys,
top
Let's
you guys
go.
Man, we're on
of
fire already.
1998.
I was thinking like a dance song, and then Cruz said
I know.
Titanic.
Not even close.
That was not
Google
close.
was founded in 1998, so you
Wow.
couldn't
Man.
even check what the last time Indiana won.
I
in
was
the
gonna
Kohl
say-
Center back then.
For some reason, Mamma Mia, but I looked it up, and that came out. That came out 10 years
2005?
later, 2008. So I was way off.
The last bit of information I have for you all, gas prices in 1998
What?
was $1.06.
Wow.
$1.06.
That's never gonna make us guess. I was just like, okay.
$1.06.
I want to live in that world.
Wow.
I would
Yeah.
kill to live in
That's crazy.
1998 right about
I think
now.
IU
Yeah.
fans would kill to see a win in Madison, Wisconsin, too.
That is exactly
Let's go back
correct.
to that.
And Cruz Martin just led us perfectly back into the discussion. This is exactly why I brought him on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Biggest thing to look for in this game, Indiana, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is 11th in KenPom and are projected in KenPom. Just going to give you all a little bit of a heads up for our predictions. They're projected to win 79. Wisconsin's projected to win 79-66. What is the biggest thing you guys are looking for?
I think it was a massive issue for Indiana and Purdue, and it's been a massive issue for Indiana on the road. And they are able to come out of the gates hot, but they're not able to maintain that energy. That is going to be crucial. And this is
Especially on the
another,
road.
especially on the road. And this is going to be another environment that Wisconsin students still aren't back on campus yet.
Really?
They're not back on
No
campus.
they-
yet.
kidding.
are they
well,
not
with
back
16
on
inches
Friday?
of snow, I kind of get it.
Well, no, wait,
Is there,
sorry,
are they actually on winter break?
Yeah, they're still on winter break.
Oh, they're on winter break.
They're still on winter
Oh.
break.
What?
Yeah. So
I might,
Transfer.
yeah, I'm about to say, I'm right there with you. I might
All right,
transfer.
I'm gonna-
they
Be
do get a spring break though. I want to
Oh,
say.
yeah, no,
and they
never
get
mind,
like
never
a
mind.
Deal breaker.
They
They
got out
get-
late or something too.
They get they only get out a week after us.
Oh, really?
And then they
Wow.
get 3 days off for Thanksgiving. So
Yeah.
But
there's a
do
lot
they
of
get a
differences.
longer fall break than Indiana?
They don't get a fall break. They get
Yeah, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not
No.
like that's
so
much of a
They
difference.
don't
We
get
only
a
get
fall
a Friday
break,
off.
but then
so-
they get over a month off for winter break.
Okay.
So I think
Yeah.
that's the
Continue.
only. Sorry, I don't even know where I was going with that. But yeah, so okay, students won't be there on campus, so that's something I think this has to be a bounce back game for Indiana. But this is also going to be a bounce back bounce back game for Wisconsin. They just fell. I forget who they.
Penn State.
Penn
Penn
State.
State. Thank you.
One of the worst teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, so they just lost to Penn State, and they'll be back at home. So Wisconsin will be the team that should win. But if Indiana can maintain an energy, a bounce back energy,
Yep.
and keep it throughout the entire game, not let these Wisconsin runs get to them, they have a chance.
I'm looking at the fouling. I think if they can keep their fouling down, they're in for a much different game than they've seen through 2024. Obviously, I read the numbers earlier in this episode of what they were, but that has been really game-changing. And like I said, Purdue isn't Indiana didn't lose because of the fouling yesterday. They lost for a multitude of reasons, but that's certainly part of it. And it will be again against Wisconsin. If they can keep their foul trouble down, then they have a shot. And like you just mentioned, Wisconsin lost to Penn State last night, which shows that they're not invincible, like no team is. Yeah. But again, it was on the road, which every Big Ten team has been more than struggling on the road. But Indiana, they're facing a team that's coming off a loss, which is good and bad because it shows that they're not invincible, like I just said. But also for Wisconsin, it's further motivation coming off a loss. Now they're back at home playing Indiana, who's coming off a 20-point loss in their home. So both sides have some motivation going into this one.
Audrey, you hit on it for a minute. How is Indiana going to bounce back from being beat by 20-plus points on your home court by your conference rival? You know, that's going to be the big thing for me. How much fire does Indiana come out in their eyes in a place where you haven't won in nearly 2 decades? Keep that in mind. They have a big mountain to climb, but at the same time, you know, I think Indiana has a shot if they play a really good style of basketball, their brand of basketball. You know, I'm not counting them completely out, but it's going to be a tall task. How they come out is going to be indicative of the final score.
Yeah, you all took the words right out of my mouth. I'm really looking at that first 5 minutes for Indiana against Wisconsin. How do they come out of the gates? Are they going to come out of the gates sluggish and just look like a defeated team that's ready to give up on their season? Or are they going to come out with a fire and know that, hey, the season's not over yet and we can still make the tournament if we really lock down and win some of these games we're not supposed to? So, yeah, I'm really looking at how Indiana really comes out of the gate. Let's go on to our final 2 segments, player or players to watch. I'll actually go first, and I'm gonna break my chain here, Thomas, and I'm going to give multiple players to watch against Wisconsin.
Wow, this is breaking news, folks.
Cruz doesn't know what kind of situation this has been.
That doesn't happen very
It's a hot topic.
Heated debate.
It's a hot topic.
I am free. I am free. We switched roles because I only have one today.
Wow. Look at that.
Wow.
So I've gone to the dark side. I'm going to take a look at 2 players for this game, and it's going to be Indiana's bigs. Go Malik Renew and Kel'el Ware. They have a tall task at hand against the Wisconsin front court. They're going up against Stephen Crowell, Tyler Wall, and AJ Storr. All 3 of them have been absolutely phenomenal to start off this season for the Badgers. How are they going to play against those 2? Audrey, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go kind of with that third big man. I'm going to go with Mackenzie Mbako. I mean, he has definitely been on the up and up for the Hoosiers. And I think that they're going to – I think that Indiana is going to begin to start changing their game plan a lot more. And with Mackenzie Mbako now starting to really step up for Indiana, I think that he's going to be a primary target because with Xavier Johnson performing how he is offensively, with Gabe Cupps, he's great on the defensive end, but he's not there offensively just yet. And Trey Galloway, he's a little bit back and forth. So I think Mackenzie Mbako really brings that versatility, and I think that it'll definitely be seen in Madison. So I'm going to go Mackenzie Mbako there.
I have 2 people. I have Kel'el Ware. Well,
Look
I guess
at me,
technically,
Thomas.
technically 3.
Whoa!
Did you say Renew too? Did you also say Renew?
I said 2.
Oh, okay.
Look at this. This is a day in. Sorry.
This is incredible.
This is a history.
This is history making right here.
I'm going Kel'el Ware, who's my main player to watch. He's coming off. I'll call it a poor performance, a performance where he struggled, especially against Zach Edey, which is as tall a task as it gets, literally and figuratively. So Kel'el, I'm looking for a bounce back game. He's led this Hoosier team for the majority of the season, along with Malik Renew and a couple other guys. But I'm looking for a bounce back game from Kel'el Ware. Beyond him, this might be a little bit of a surprise, and I've mentioned in the last couple episodes, but I'm looking at Xavier Johnson. Everyone's hoping he can bounce back in some fashion, and like I said, we know he's more than capable of doing it. He's just in a mental funk, whatever it is. But I think it's a matter of when he's going to break that mental funk, and hopefully it could be against Wisconsin.
Thomas, right on the spot, dude. I mean, Kel'el Ware having a tough game against Zach Edey, frustrating night. How are you going to respond? But Xavier Johnson, I think, is also a really intriguing one to look at because, at any point he could bust out of whatever he's going through. All it's going to take is one performance like we saw against Ohio State where he had 18 points. I don't think he had a turnover in that game either.
No, he did not.
All it could take is one game. Xavier Johnson is a guy who rides the wave. When things are good, things are really good. When things are bad, things are really, really bad. So I think we're in a valley right now. All it'll take is one good performance for him to peak once again. And, if he can put together a solid performance against Wisconsin, that could shoot him right out of there.
100%.
Well, now let's take a look at our predictions, and this is where I really get outshined in my realism. I can only imagine. So, with him being our special guest today, Cruz Martin, we're going to start off with you. Score prediction against Wisconsin.
75-64, Wisconsin by 11 is what I have. 75-64, Wisconsin by 11. I think Indiana's going to come out with some fire, like I talked about. They were going to come out with some fire, but I don't think that it's going to be enough to stop Wisconsin's attack. They're just so well-rounded across the board. I don't think, especially going into the Kohl Center, Wisconsin students not being there, I don't think that's going to have an effect on the game anyway. I still have Wisconsin coming out on top by 11.
Thomas, let's go to you.
Alrighty. I'm going to go Wisconsin again, too. I've been pretty optimistic throughout the season.
Yes.
A couple curveballs here
I'm
and there.
the only one that chose Purdue.
Hayden's the only one that chose Purdue, which was obviously a mistake. So I'm going to try and be a little bit... In hindsight. Going to try and be a little bit more realistic throughout the rest of the season. Wisconsin, I genuinely believe Wisconsin... is going to take down Indiana. They're coming off that loss. They're a very, very talented team. They're ranked 11th in the nation. Indiana, to this point, hasn't really proved all that much. They had a nice win against Ohio State and, not too much more after that. So I'd like to hope it's going to be close, maybe a little bit closer than 11. So I'm going to go 71-64, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Nice.
Audrey.
I'm going to go Wisconsin here,
Okay.
but I do think that this will be Indiana's best performance on the road. I think that they're both coming off of a bounce-back game, and I think with Wisconsin, they have the home court advantage, and they are going to... I think Wisconsin is a tournament team. They're ranked number 11 right now, and I mean, they're a dominant team, and it'll be shown on the court, and I think that this will also be a show of Indiana's dominance as well, but Wisconsin will overall get the upper hand in the end.
What's your score prediction?
Oh, sorry.
You can't get away that easy.
82-74.
Okay.
82-74 Wisconsin.
Right there.
Well,
Yeah.
I said that I was going to be outshined in my
Is
realism.
this the first time we're all aligned?
Don't
Hayden.
mess this up.
It's up to
I
Hayden.
haven't said anything
Oh,
yet.
sorry.
I will say, though,
No pressure.
I've got Wisconsin 79-65. I think the Badgers are really going to get off to a good start. I think Indiana is going to put themselves in a hole to start off the game, but they're going to try and fight back, kind of like they did in the Purdue game. They're going to cut it into single digits, and then Wisconsin is going to show that they're clearly the better team and start running away with it. And they're going to win at 79-65. We've really only had one time where the score is actually hit, but it's been unofficial.
Oh, yes.
So we shall see.
That was very exciting. I'm actually, not over that yet. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Is there like a prize or something for guessing the right?
Cruz doesn't know. Hayden asked me last week. I'm going to bring this back up. Hayden asked me last week, because we didn't do our score
He's
predictions.
never going to live it down.
So
Never.
before the game started, what was it, Ohio State? I think it was Ohio
Ohio
State.
State.
Before the game started, he asked me and Audrey our score predictions, and I swear, there's no proof, but I swear I said 71-65 and drilled it.
Oh,
And no, I did not get a prize, but maybe there should be.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Interesting.
No prizes are
Maybe
given out.
ice
So
cream or
We'll
something.
figure it
It's
out.
worth
yeah,
asking. It's worth asking.
don't expect to get anything if
No
if Wisconsin-
compensation, no NIL money.
No.
Or,
I wish.
Fair enough.
I wish we
Fair
got
enough.
it as reporters, but we don't.
fair enough.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Until next time, Cruz, we're going to get you in on this one. Alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, and our special guest, Cruz Martin. Cruz, there you go.
There you go. Okay.
I'm
I
Hayden
like it.
Smith, hanging up the phone on this episode of TCP. Have a great day, Hoosier fans.
Boom.
Toast.